Hello there, Dr. Kelling here again, this time from the quiet of my home, so I think maybe it'll be a little less harsh atmosphere for you. If you haven't yet listened to the introductory video and watched that, I would encourage you to do that first, because that video covers a lot of things related to the class rules, syllabus, summary, the way things work, the different websites, all of that. So I encourage you to watch that video first. And I left something out of that I need to talk about here very briefly, and that is with my engineering lab. You should know that you get two different tries at the attempts at the problem. Pearson differentiates between the terms trial and attempt. I think if you look them up in the dictionary, you'll find they're synonyms. But for each problem you work, for each question, you get 3 trials. That is 3 tries at the answer. On the third one, if you don't get it correct, it will present you with the correct answer. Then, once you're finished with that problem, there's a little box at the bottom that says similar exercise. And if you'd like to keep working on this problem, you can click on similar exercise. It will give you another attempt. That is, it'll change, on most problems, it will change the numbers of the problem, but the problem itself is the same, just with some different numbers. And you get 3 more tries in that regard. If you get the right answer in any one of those, you get credit for the correct answer. So just know that you get 3 tries and you're almost out, but you get another attempt, you get 2 attempts, and then you're done with that problem. So I wanted to make that clear. So let's get started with our class content or class material. Today, I'm going to talk about some very basic information about money, and then we'll talk about different types of interest, simple interest, and compound interest. So the first topic is money, and I want to make sure that we're very clear about money here. And the money that we need to be very clear about is decisions that are made. You make many decisions about money personally. You will make many decisions about money professionally. And what you need to understand is, and you should already know, money is not everything. Money isn't the most important thing. Money probably isn't in the top 5 of the most important things. And it shouldn't be. But you need to realize when people make decisions, they make decisions based on a collection of information. And one of those elements, generally, typically, is money. And in this class, just because of the content and the subject and the needs of this class, money is king. And therefore, all of our solutions are money. Not to take away anything from the other elements, other attributes, other characteristics of the problem, other things that need to be considered. We, in this class, won't care about any of those things. We care about money. And therefore, what gets us the most money, or what costs us the least amount of money, will be those things that are most important to us. I want to make sure that's clear up front. So talking a little bit about the text, chapter 1 is some introductory material. You should at least skim through chapter 1. There are some homework problems from chapter 1 that I've already assigned that you can work. There are only 5 questions. They're generally really more like word algebra problems, more than anything else. And just to get you thinking about money in general, the flow of money in general. So it's fundamental, basic. This is about all I'm going to talk about, chapter 1. Chapter 1 is called Present Economy. And present economy studies are those studies that have to do with money that occurs right now, not money or cash flows in the future. So you need to keep that straight, first of all. But the time value of money is very critical in this class. That is, that money has value over time. It earns value over time. It grows in value over time, or maybe shrinks if we think about inflation. Let me state right now that inflation is important. Inflation is a very important consideration. As I record this, this is Friday, the 18th of December. The Federal Open Market Committee, which is a subset of governors of the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve Chairman, who currently is Janet Yellen, made what they called a historic decision earlier this week, which was to raise the federal funds rate. I'll talk a little bit more about that later on another video, perhaps. But this is interest. This is that's an interest rate, and that's the rate at which money grows. And the reason they raised the rate is there's a little bit of fear of inflation, and inflation is very important with respect to the value of money. But we are going to typically stay away from the topic of inflation until perhaps the very end of the course. And at that time, we may discuss inflation just a little bit more. We don't cover chapters 2 and 3 in the text generally up front. This is cost issues. This is estimation. We don't do that yet. If we have time near the end of the class, we'll cover that. But it's not the most important thing for us to do right now. So we're not going to do that. We're going to jump immediately to chapter 4. And in chapter 4, we'll talk about money and how its value changes over time. For the rest of this little snippet video, we'll be talking about 2 different types of interest. We'll talk about simple interest. We'll talk about compound interest. Simple interest is just it's simple, and it's something that we won't talk about much. I will talk about it here, and then we'll get off of it, and we won't use it again in the rest of the class. It's used a little bit, mostly on the personal side, not necessarily the professional side, but you need to at least understand what it is. And also in chapter 4, you'll learn some terminology. And just as with any field in engineering, there's terminology that you need to know, terms that are used to help speak and communicate efficiently in a particular subject area. We will learn some of that. And we're beginning with simple and with compound interest. So that makes it a little easier for us to communicate. Okay, so money. We want more than we have, right? Probably like to have more. Here it is 1 week before Christmas, and I'd like to have more. Corporations have a responsibility to their shareholders to maximize, if you will, the return on the shareholders' investments. The shareholders would like to make more money. Corporate responsibility, perhaps, that's another topic. Corporations are responsible to their shareholders. And in like manner, public institutions, like perhaps nonprofits, governmental entities, very importantly, have a responsibility to the taxpayers not to waste their money. So while they may not be interested in profits, they are interested in minimizing costs for the same product or service. And we even you at your young age could share horror stories about waste that you've seen, and perhaps that hasn't bothered you too much, but once you start paying large amounts of taxes, it will be an issue. So this brings us to the return on capital, or the return to capital, as is demonstrated and discussed in the text. We want to maximize return, maximize what we can get for our funds, and that is putting our money to work. If you have money, cash, you don't keep it under your mattress or in a sock drawer. I hope you should have, if it's any decent amount of money, it should be invested somehow, at least in the bank, earning some really low currently interest return to that capital that you've invested. So we use the term, interest generically. Interest really represents the return we receive on invested funds. And interest has been around since, well, for a long time, perhaps 2,000 years BC, Babylon. Interest, excessive interest is called usury. One might argue that payday lenders currently charge usury, that is, outlandish interest. One might even argue that credit card companies charge exorbitant interest. And we'll talk maybe a little bit more about those, especially when we get to the topic of effective interest, which is near the end of chapter 4. So let's move very quickly through simple interest. Now let me start by saying simple interest is a term that some people use for compound interest. So you have to be very careful if someone uses the term simple interest in something that you're involved in. Stop them and clarify what they mean by simple interest. The official use of the term simple interest is really limited to what I'm going to illustrate right now. I'm going to open up a worksheet, a Google Sheet, and I'll flash it up here on the screen. And you can, I'll talk us through simple interest. There you should see on your screen a Google Sheet. And let's let little I be the simple interest rate. Capital N is the number of interest periods. Capital P is the principal, or the initial amount of funds that we have. And capital I is the total interest earned. Well, there's a relationship, a very simple relationship. And that relationship is I, capital I, is equal to P times N times I. Very straightforward. But let's give some values to these terms. Let's let the simple interest rate be 5%. I'll say 0.05. Number of interest periods. Let's look at the interest you would earn over 3 years. So the interest rate is 5% per year. Let's be very specific about that. Wow. Just about shouts at you, does it not? I'm afraid I'm going to get the same thing down here. Number of interest period is 3 years. And the principal or initial amount of funds is, let's say, I don't know, $1,000. What is our total interest earned? Well, if we follow the formula as presented there, our total interest earned would be equal to P the $1,000 times in 3 years times the interest rate, or 5% per year, $150. And we know that 5% of $1,000 is $50. That's what you would earn in year one, and that's what you would earn then in year two, and that's what you would earn in year three. And that's all well and good. However, this interest is akin to putting your money under your mattress. Let me talk about that a little further. So you have $1,000 and you put it into an account, and it earns 5% interest in that first year. And you get $50 interest. What do you do with that $50? Well, simple interest assumes, if you will, that you take that $50 and you take it away and you put it somewhere where it's not going to earn any money. It's just the $50 that you have. And then in the next year, you have $1,000 in your account and it earns 5% interest. So you earn another $50 and you take it out and you put it under your mattress. And now you have $100 under your mattress. And the third year, you have $1,000 in your account. It earns 5% interest. That's $50. You take it out, you put it under your mattress. You have earned $150 in interest. And your account, your total funds available now, are the $1,000 that you had originally, plus the $150 in interest. So you have $1,150. That sounds like perhaps a good thing. Your $1,000, without you really doing anything at all, has earned you $150 in 3 years. Well, that's fine, but it's not really the way the world works. So let me begin by saying, in summary, that is simple interest. P times N times I gives you the total interest amount that you've earned. That's it. That's simple interest. There are other implications of simple interest. Like if you borrowed $10,000, you still owe interest on the $10,000, no matter how much you pay off. I've got a horror story of my own about a simple interest loan. Let's dispense with that and move to how the world really works in almost every instance. You might see simple interest. You might stumble across simple interest sometime in your life. But the world generally works on compound interest. And with compound interest, here's the way it works. I have my $1,000 and it earns 5% interest. So in the first year, I earned $50. And in the second year, instead of taking the $50 out and putting it under my mattress, I leave it in. And the $1,000 is now $1,050, and that earns 5% interest. And the 5% isn't applied just to the $1,000. The 5% is applied to the $1,000 and to the $50. So 5% of $50 is $2.50, which may not sound like much, but it's $2.50. So my interest in that next year is $52.50. And I leave that in, and in the third year, I get 5% interest on the 1,000 and the 50 and the 52.50. So my interest in the third year is even more. So let's look at the numbers in comparison to the simple interest. There's our simple interest screen. Hopefully you get that. Now let's look at what happens with compound interest. Compound interest, I'm going to say EOY, and that stands for end of year. Okay, our cash flows in this class, as I'll explain more later, are end of year cash flows. We're going to assume that they are end of year. Now that's going to change to end of month, end of week, end of 6 months. But for now, let's just stick with the end of year. And when I put a 0 there, that means right now, this instant is end of year 0. Then we have 1, 2, and 3. Okay, let's look at our cash amount. At the end of year 0, right now we put in $1,000. That's fine. What happens in the first year? Well, we earn 5% interest. So the amount that I have at the end of the year is my original amount, $1,000, plus 5% of $1,000, or $1,050. So in the first year, it's the same as simple interest because we have not had any opportunity for the compounding of the interest. What do we have at the end of the second year? Well, at the end of the second year, we have what we had at the end of the first year, plus we have 5% of what we had at the end of the first year, or 1,050. So we have $1,103, and we'd see that that's, let's give it a little more. There's our 5250 rearing its head there. And in year 3, what do we have at the end of the third year? Well, that's equal to what we had before, plus 5% of what we had before, $1,157.63. So how much interest did we earn? Well, interest that we earned is equal to this, what we ended up with minus the original amount, for $157.63 versus $150 with simple interest. And that's the difference between simple and compound interest. So that doesn't seem like too much. Not a lot of difference. How much was that difference again? $7.63. Well, what if instead of $1,000 it was $10,000? What if instead of $10,000 it was an investment that your company had of $10 million? Now that's substantial. And I can tell you that the longer time goes, the more and more the compounding builds on itself and the growth is exponential. And the power of compounding we will demonstrate perhaps in the next video when we start to talk about economic equivalence, which begins with section 4.3 or 4.4, 4.4 maybe. But the compounding, as you compound the compounded amounts, grows and grows and grows to the point where the interest on the interest is larger than the interest on the original principal that you deposited. And it's that sort of return that those of us who want to retire at some point to as being very important to us, that we're at the upward trend of the exponential growth of the compound interest. And that's where we want to be. From now on in this class, we will be using, except for maybe a homework question or two, and a quiz question perhaps, that specifically ask for simple interest answer. Other than that, everything we do in this class is compound interest. And that's the default, is compound interest. And as we look at economic equivalence next time, that compound interest is very important as we begin to understand how we can move money using these interest factors that make for what's called this economic equivalence. This is very fundamental. As we continue to talk about the basics in Chapter 4, we will continue to work on understanding this compound interest concept. Today we used a Google Sheet. We will be using Google Sheets much more as these videos progress and as the classroom progresses. So as I've said before, make sure you're very comfortable with using a spreadsheet and be able to work them pretty quickly. And when we do, we'll find that the size of the problems really don't become as much of a factor because the computer does the work for us. Next time, we'll talk a little bit more about that Federal Open Market Committee and the federal funds rate, just for some interesting history. And we'll talk about this concept of compounding to the next step, and perhaps the basic foundational issue that allows us to solve all the problems from here on out, which is economic equivalence. So stay tuned for video number 3, and I'll see you then.